Here are the top stories for today, March 31, 2021. As the COVID-19 pandemic is not taking a break, testing facilities will remain open during Holy Week. The government warns the public against fake vaccines sold online. A lawmaker is calling for the swift passage of Bayanihan III to be able to provide subsidies for unemployed Filipinos. And an organic food producer in Negros Occidental promotes the traditional food of the island. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. As the COVID-19 pandemic is not taking a break, operations of testing laboratories must also continue during the Holy Week. This as the Health Department implored these facilities to remain open as the country continues to grapple with a surge in COVID-19 cases. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres says the department issued a memorandum to all COVID-19 testing laboratories to continue their operations to monitor the number of cases. Meanwhile, Malacanang says there is a 50-50 chance that the enhanced community quarantine imposed in the National Capital Region and 4 nearby provinces will be extended beyond April 4. Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the government will observe the COVID-19 cases and they will consider the recommendation of the experts to extend the ECQ if necessary. For his part, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said extending the ECQ would only be done as a last resort to prevent a collapse of the country's healthcare system. Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said this year is intended for containment strategy. This as the government secures a steady vaccine supply. Under the strategy, the government will boost vaccination in April and May, targeting to inoculate 500,000 to 1 million persons per week. In June and July, the government eyes 2 to 3 million inoculations per week as the bulk of the vaccines are expected to arrive during that time. The number of vaccine shots to be administered will increase by 3 million to 5 million per week from August to December. The government says it will authorize local pharmaceutical companies to directly communicate with their foreign counterparts in order for the country to attain vaccine security by the year 2022. About 30,000 antigen testing kits have been distributed in NCR Plus to ramp up the COVID-19 detection efforts of the government. Testing czar Vince Dizon said the antigen testing will be on top of the average 50,000 RT-PCR daily testing nationwide. He said the Office of the Civil Defense, or OCD, is also eyeing to procure 500,000 antigen test kits to be deployed in communities and hospitals in ECQ areas. Dizon said the Philippines ranked 3rd in terms of COVID-19 testing capacity among Asian countries with over 100 million population next to India and China. He said the country breached the 10 million tests since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the Health Department clarified that a PhilHealth identification number is not a requirement to register for and to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. It says the government will set up registration booths at official vaccination sites to facilitate on-site PhilHealth registration. Under the Universal Healthcare Law, all Filipinos are automatic members of PhilHealth. The public is warned against fake COVID-19 vaccines sold online. The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, says COVID-19 vaccines in the country can only be accessed from DOH-authorized vaccination sites for free. The FDA says there are only 4 COVID-19 vaccines in the country granted with Emergency Use Authorization, or EUA. These are Pfizer-BioNTech, AstraZeneca, CoronaVac, and Sputnik V. Deputy Director Dr. Oscar Gutierrez Jr. of the FDA says, apart from being ineffective and giving false sense of protection, fake COVID-19 vaccines are contaminated with hazardous substances which may lead to toxicity and even death. The FDA has collaborated with the World Health Organization, the International Criminal Police Organization, and other international organizations to ensure that no fake COVID-19 vaccines get into the supply chain of the country. Manila City starts its vaccination drive for those listed under the A3 priority list. Meanwhile, Taguig, Pasig, and Pasay cities come up with ways to control the spread of COVID-19 in their areas. The details from Laid Kabagani.
In Manila, inoculation per persons with comorbidities started today as the city government receives the new batch of COVID-19 vaccines. Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso says the remaining A1 or the healthcare worker beneficiaries will still be accommodated. In Taguig City, food packs have been distributed to around 28 villages starting Monday. The stay-at-home food packs contain rice, canned goods, coffee, energy drink, and a hygiene kit with masks, face shields, alcohol, and soap as protection against COVID-19 virus. Meanwhile, the Pasig Mega Market limits its operational time from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. only. The Pasig Pass Quick Response Code is required when going in and out of the market to aid the city's contact tracing efforts. And in Pasay City, a market day coding system is being implemented, which means residents are only allowed on their scheduled days. The coding scheme is to prevent the high volume of people entering the wet market's premises and maintaining minimum health protocols, particularly on social distancing. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Kabagani.
Still to come, more than 5,000 violators were apprehended during the first day of ECQ in NCR+, and more COVID-19 vaccines arrived in Davao and Iloilo. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Pangalagaan ng sarili laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Hanggat maaari, umiwas sa mataong lugar. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong at bibig, maging malinis sa katawan at ugaliin ang wastong paghuhugas ng kamay. Takpan ang ilong at bibig kung uubo o babahing. Umiwas sa mga taong nagpapakita ng sintomas ng coronavirus disease gaya ng lagnat, ubo at sipon. Magsuot ng face mask kung kinakailangan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
All essential workers or authorized persons outside of residence can enjoy free rides on board modern jeepneys in several routes in Metro Manila. The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board, or LTFRB, says free service is available in 44 modern jeepney routes until Easter Sunday. It was made possible under its service contracting program. Under the said program, drivers of public utility vehicles can enjoy extra income by providing transportation services or through performance-based incentives that require drivers to provide improved services to passengers. APORs will need to present identification proving their status to avail of the free service. The Philippine National Police on Tuesday said it logged a total of 5,405 violators during the first day of the enhanced community quarantine in the NCR Plus bubble. PNP spokesperson Brigadier General Ildebrandi Usana said over half of the number have violated the uniform curfew, while the rest are violators of the minimum health standard protocols. As expected, National Capital Region has the highest numbers of curfew violators. Usana said the first day of the week-long ECQ was generally peaceful, although policemen have experienced challenges such as dealing with persons not authorized to go outside their residences, including children, despite the restrictions. He also said plenty of public utility vehicles were not aware of the limited capacity imposed by the Interagency Task Force. About 1,500 more police officers will be deployed to public areas in Metro Manila to ensure that minimum health protocols are observed during the week-long ECQ and Holy Week. NCRPO Chief Major General Vicente Danao Jr. said more personnel would patrol places of worship, malls, markets, commercial areas, and community centers. The NCRPO also coordinated with the Armed Forces of the Philippines and local government units, along with barangay peacekeeping teams, traffic enforcers, security guards, and other volunteer groups to aid in public safety. Over 8,000 police officers have been deployed to the streets for the usual anti-criminality operations. The Davao Region has received another 7,200 doses of Sinovac COVID-19 vaccines. The additional vaccines arrived at the Davao International Airport on Tuesday morning. DOH Region 11 Director Dr. Annabel Yumang said the vaccines will be allocated to more health workers in the region. She added that based on the vaccine consumption rate, the region is at 98%. Since Group A1 is almost covered, she said, registration for senior citizens is now being held in the region. Meanwhile, an additional 7,200 vials of Sinovac arrived on Tuesday in Iloilo for distribution around Western Visayas. Dr. Mary Jane Juanico, head of the Infectious Disease Cluster of the DOH Western Visayas Center for Health Development, said the additional vials were from the 400,000 vials that arrived in the country on March 24. She added that the doses are not enough, so DOH Western Visayas is considering giving them to unvaccinated healthcare workers in hospitals and temporary treatment facilities. As of March 28, the region has received over 29,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. The 100 Islands National Park in Pangasinan is welcoming tourists this Holy Week, except those from areas under Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ. This and more in today's Provincial Roundup from Marita Moahe.
The 100 Islands National Park in Alaminos City, Pangasinan is open to tourists this Holy Week, except those from areas under Enhanced Community Quarantine. The park will only accommodate 1,500 per day following the guidelines of the Interagency Task Force. Tourists from general community quarantine areas should present negative RT-PCR test results released within 72 hours and a valid identification card, while tourists from modified GCQ areas should present valid identification cards. Meanwhile, beaches in most towns will be temporarily closed during the Holy Week, while a no-swimming policy is imposed in Tondaligan Beach in Dagupan City. Meanwhile, tourist destinations in Benguet are still closed to tourists. Governor Melchor Dicla said municipalities have opened some destinations exclusively for the locals to enjoy and to break the monotony of the isolation and quarantine. The municipality of Atok, home of the man-made Sakura Plantation Park, has not opened its borders to tourists. Other natural destinations such as Bengaungao Cave in Tublay, Mount Purgatory, and Badekbek Sulphur Spring in Bocod and Mount Pulag in Cabayan are still closed. In Sarangani, tourism has reportedly started to recover after a down year in 2020, with most travel restrictions in the province and other parts of Region 12 lifted. Since January, Sarangani recorded nearly 100,000 tourists who spent at least a day in various tourism sites and establishments in the province. The white sand beaches of Barangay Gumasa in Glan Town recorded the most number of visitors despite only opening to those from outside Region 12 early this month. This is still way below the 1.1 million same-day visitors recorded in the province in 2019 or before the onset of the pandemic. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Moahe.
And now for our business news, 13 electric cooperatives in Visayas will receive millions of pesos in benefits under the Energy Regulations 1-94 program of the Department of Energy. The program from the Energy Development Corporation aims to recompense host communities of energy resources and energy generating facilities. Noreco 1 was the first to receive its electrification fund amounting to 4.16 million pesos based on the DOE's computation under its Energy Regulation 1-94 program, she said. Noreen Bautista, head of EDC's Corporate Social Responsibility team in Negros, said the disbursement of benefits to community partners is an opportunity to forge a stronger partnership with them. EDC operates its 222.5 megawatt Southern Negros geothermal facility and its subsidiary Green Core Geothermal Incorporated in Valencia, Negros Oriental. The geothermal power firm's over 1,480 megawatts total installed capacity accounts for 20% of the country's total installed renewable energy capacity. Up next, a lawmaker is calling for the swift passage of Bayanihan III to be able to provide subsidies for unemployed Filipinos. And an organic food producer in Negros Occidental promotes the traditional food of the island. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang mga dapat gawin sa lugar ng trabaho laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ang mga kumpanya ay dapat magbigay ng face mask sa kanilang mga empleyado. Bukod dito, magbigay kaalaman din patungkol sa COVID-19. Siguraduhin malinis ang kapaligiran. Maglagay ng sabon at hand sanitizer sa mga palikuran. Siguraduhin ligtas at nalutong maigi ang mga pagkain sa kantina. Obserbahan ang kalusugan ng mga empleyado at katrabaho. Kung sakali man na mayroon silang sintomas ng coronavirus disease, gaya ng lagnat, ubot sipon at hirap sa paghinga, ay agad ipasuri sa doktor. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. Marikina City Representative Stella Quimbo is calling for the swift passage of the proposed Bayanihan to Arise as One Act, or the Bayanihan III. Quimbo said high unemployment has persisted throughout the pandemic and that the enhanced community quarantine puts workers at even greater risk. Quimbo made the call after the Philippine Statistics Authority reported that the unemployment rate for February 2021 rose to 8.8%. As such, households must be assured that they can meet their basic needs while under quarantine. The proposed Bayanihan III provides 52 billion peso subsidy for workers in small businesses. This is on top of the 30 billion peso assistance to the unemployed and 108 billion peso for additional social amelioration. Meanwhile, Albay Representative Joey Salceda said the actual employed persons increased by 1.905 million from January to February 2021. Salceda said self-employed increased by 697,000 month-on-month. He said unemployment will only decline significantly once there is reasonable certainty that lockdowns will no longer be necessary moving forward. The Philippine government has called on Myanmar security forces to stop using force against unarmed protesters. The Department of Foreign Affairs expressed profound dismay over the country's Bloody Armed Forces Day last March 27, where more than 100 people were killed. The DFA said it remains steadfast in supporting Myanmar achieve a fuller democracy, starting with the immediate release of State Councilor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and duly elected civilian leaders. Over 100 people, including some children, were reportedly killed in a lethal crackdown on pro-democracy protesters during Myanmar's Armed Forces Day, the worst day of violence since the military junta seized power. As of March 29, about 400 have been killed by the junta's armed forces since February 1, at least 26 of whom are children under the age of 18. And in our news overseas, the COVID-19 pandemic has erased years of progress in poverty reduction in the Asia-Pacific region, according to the United Nations. The UN said an additional 89 million people in the region could have been pushed back into extreme poverty in 2020, erasing years of progress in poverty reduction. The Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific 2021 suggested that the region needs large yet attainable investments in resilience to protect development gains. The survey forecasts that Asia-Pacific economies may grow by 5.9% in 2021 and 5% in 2022. With this, the region is urged to speed up and make its transition towards more resilient, equitable, and green development the centerpiece of post-pandemic economic recovery. The survey also called for a more synchronized vaccination program across countries and close regional cooperation. Rehabilitation efforts in Marawi continues as it completes half of its target infrastructures in the area. Task Force Bangon Marawi is positive it will deliver the full completion of the projects within the year. Claire Gighe tells us more.
Task Force Bangon Marawi or TFBM Chairman Secretary Eduardo Del Rosario announced that Marawi's rebuilding process is now about 45 to 50% complete, stating that efforts to rehabilitate the country's only Islamic city after the 5-month siege remains on track.
Last month, I said it was about 40%. Now I can say na we are now about 45 to 50%. You will notice na yung mga projects natin, different stages of completion. Merong 60%, merong 70%, merong 35%, merong 40%. So I would say on the average, it's between 45 to 50% accomplishment for the whole project.
Secretary Del Rosario further said that of the ongoing government project or public infrastructure, he considers the road network being undertaken by the National Housing Authority or NHA as the most important.
The number one most important is the road networks kasi from the node networks, makikita natin ngayon yung magiging alignment, ano yung magiging itsura ng ating open space. And we are targeting that this will be completed by September or October. And we are on target. Actually, they are over the targets by about 3%. So, matatapos natin talaga yung road networks on time.
Aside from various road networks inside Marawi's most affected area, the NHA is likewise spearheading the construction of a traffic command center, as well as permanent shelters in Barangay Kilala and Barangay Mipantaw, Gadongan. Through its fund source, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Marawi Recovery, Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Program. Secretary Del Rosario is on his third visit to Marawi this year to personally inspect the progress of ongoing projects aimed at helping affected families get back on their feet. COVID. On Thursday, the TFBM chief toured several permanent housing sites in Barangay Patani, Barangay Kilala, and Barangay Gadongan, as well as in Barangay Dulay proper. Secretary Del Rosario reiterated his call on TFBM's 56 implementing agencies to double time to be able to meet their target completion timeline, which is by December of this year. For PNA Newsroom, Claire Gigha of the Philippine Information Agency Iligan City Information Center.
The Department of Tourism is pushing for the inclusion of tour guides, operators, and other accredited workers and service providers in the country's A4 vaccine priority group. The DOT requested Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. to expand the vaccination priority list and include tourism workers. It said vaccination will protect these workers from COVID-19 as they prepare to welcome foreign and domestic tourists. Vaccination also serves as a firewall that will restrict the spread of the virus in tourist destinations. The tourism sector is among the most affected during the pandemic, with foreign tourism receipts falling by 83% from 82.2 billion pesos in 2020 from 482 billion the prior year. Tourism frontliners fall within the A4 group or frontline personnel in essential sectors. Negrense advocates are pioneering the slow food travel model in the Philippines. Slow food travel is a tourism model that promotes homegrown food and traditional cooking centered on local chefs, farmers, bakers, and other food producers. The slow food community of Negros Island commits to promoting and preserving the traditional food of Negros Island and to changing the local food system one step at a time. Organic food producer Ramon Uy Jr. said the guiding principles of slow food include supporting small-scale farmers producing good, clean, fair food, as well as agroecology preservation. Their group lauded the Slow Food Travel Project during the two-day pop-up Earth Markets held in Bacolod City on March 27 and March 28. The project is a partnership between the Slow Food Community Negros Island, Department of Tourism, Department of Agriculture, Central Philippine State University, and Slow Food International. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. As the COVID-19 pandemic is not taking a break, testing facilities will remain open during Holy Week. The government warns the public against fake vaccines sold online. A lawmaker is calling for the swift passage of Bayanihan III to be able to provide subsidies for unemployed Filipinos. And an organic food producer in Negros Occidental promotes the traditional food of the island. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day.